Okay, if you can't see me too well at the back, don't worry, it's the slides that are important, not me, okay? So, well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for having me, board members and everyone else. I know it's been a tricky time here recently, and I think it's very important that we carry on doing this kind of thing, making sure that people's lives aren't too disrupted. So I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to a full day. The topic of my session is digital literacies, or what it means to be literate in the 21st century. And the talk is organised around a few questions. And the first question is, what is digital literacy? So I think we all have a good handle on what literacy is, right? When I went to school back in the 1930s, the stated aim of school education, you could leave school at 16, but when you left school at 16, you should be capable of three things. You should be able to read, write, and do mathematics. Yeah, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We used to call them, in England, we call them the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Which I always thought showed just how literate we are in the United Kingdom. So that was the stated aim of education. When people left school at the age of 16, they should be able to do those three things well. And that model's actually served us very, very well for a long, long time. But then something came along, as so often happens, to disrupt that kind of thing. And that was predominantly, I think, the early 2000s, when networking and the internet came along, where new ways of communicating, of sharing, of preparing materials and information was suddenly open to everyone, and that definition of literacy suddenly became slightly too narrow, if you like, to describe what we could do online and off. So here's my first question. What is digital literacy? I'm going to ask you to shout out a few things. If I asked you to say what you thought it meant to be digitally literate, what might that include in terms of skills or knowledge? Shout at me. Knowing how to use, who shouted there? Who was that who shouted?
Social media?
I have no idea. Okay, apps, learning how to use apps, social media, learning how to manage social media, yeah? What else?
Mobile devices.
Mobile devices, knowing how to use your mobile phone or your tablet or both. Someone at the back shout at me.
Digital safety.
Thank you. I don't know who that was, but thank you very much. Excellent. Hi, good morning. Digital safety, that's an incredibly important part of what we do, especially when we're working with people under the age of 18. Keeping them safe, or helping them learn how to stay safe online. Very important one. That's a good one. Thank you. Any others?
Searching.
Yes. Yeah, and actually one of the fundamental skills, which I'll come to in a second, searching, the ability to find things. That's a massively important skill these days. Any others?
Being critical.
Oh, stereocriticals. Yes, being critical is actually is a big skill. Being critical, learning how to evaluate and know what's good or what's bad, incredibly important. One more?
Curating.
Curating, there's a word. It's a word I simultaneously like and hate. We used to call it just saving or bookmarking or something, but now everything's curated these days. I curate my vegetable garden when I'm at home. Oh yes. Okay, so curating, knowing how to store things and come back to them later. Okay, so I've got a couple of definitions for you, and I'm going to read them out to you, and that's not because I think you can't read, because I assume as teachers you can all read, but because the text may be a little small for those people at the back, or those people of my age whose eyes don't work properly anymore. So looking at the first one, it says that digital literacy is the ability to understand and use information in multiple formats from a wide range of sources when it's presented via computers. And when I first read that, I thought, okay, that's reasonable. But then I thought, actually, no, there's a word in there that I really don't like. What do you think that word is? Yes, correct. Who said that? Who said computers? The clever. Excellent. You can leave now. You've done, all your work is done. That's a brilliant answer. Yeah, computers is the word, because actually, when you think about it, computers are becoming less and less important to us, I think. How many interactions do you have on your mobile phone or tablet compared to the number of interactions you have on a laptop or a desktop computer. The curve is going in the other way, and sales are going in the other way. We now buy more tablets and smartphones than we do computers. So computers are quite problematic because unless we have to, we don't generally spend a lot of time sitting behind a computer. We're more likely to be lying on the sofa watching telly on a tablet or something like that. So computers kind of not on its way out, but certainly in decline, maybe a slow decline. Now, the second definition is good because it comes from Wikipedia, which means, as I'm sure you know, it's 100% true and accurate. Oh yes. And it's in two parts. The first part says that digital literacy is the ability to locate, organize, understand, evaluate, and create information using digital technology. Now, I think that's brilliant. Particularly as an English teacher, I think that first half is brilliant. Why is it brilliant? It's interactive. From a grammatical point of view, why is it brilliant? Come on. Call yourself English teacher. Yes, sir. Lots of verbs. Yes, lots of verbs. Verbs are good. When people are verbing, as we say in English, they're doing things. And actually, as teachers, that's what we want. We want our students to be doing stuff. We want them to be playing with the language. So we want them to be doing some of these higher order skills, locating, organizing, understanding, evaluating, synthesizing, rewriting, blah, 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 creating. These are all good. They're all good, the kind of things that as language teachers, we really want our students to be doing. So it's a good start. Now the second bit says, digitally literate people can communicate and work more efficiently, especially with those who possess the same knowledge and skills. And when I read that, I thought that pretty much sounds like two people speaking the same language, right? If two people speak the same language, they can communicate and work more efficiently. So a lot of the discourse around technology is very similar to the discourse around language learning, interestingly enough. And in our profession, we have a huge collection of TLAs. Everyone know what a TLA is? Congratulations, sir. Yes, a TLA is a three-letter acronym, and TLA is a good example of a three-letter acronym. Yes, it's going to get even more meta as we go down the rabbit hole. So we have a lot of TLAs in our profession. We have ELT, English Language Teaching, or English Language Teachers, SLA, Second Language Acquisition, EFL, English as a Foreign Language, ESL, English as a Second Language. I could go on, but I won't. And in the discourse of technology, we have the three-letter acronym DSL, Digital as a Second Language. And I am not a native speaker of DSL. I'm certainly a near-native proficient C2 level speaker of DSL, because I spend most of my time working with digital technologies. But I wasn't born, when I was born it was black and white outside. So I've had to learn it, and I'm a very proficient speaker of it, but it's not a natural thing to me. Continuing with that discourse, this is a little bit from a book by a man called Marc Prensky. Marc Prensky famously popularized two terms, and they were digital native and digital immigrant. You may have heard those before. And he said that our professors, who are digital immigrants, so not fluent speakers of digital, see the technology as a series of programs or things, or in linguistic terms, nouns. So we're back to the nouns and the verbs. And it's very true. If you think about maybe someone in your family who's not so comfortable with technology, they may have a certain view of technology. You know, the printer ate my paper, the computer ruined my pen drive, the computer hates me. You may have heard those things. You may have said them, and that's fine. But all of that's kind of problematic. It is viewing technology as a series of things which just kind of get in the way of normal life. So that would be what Prensky calls the digital immigrants. And then underneath he says, today's students, if they are native speakers, I know that terminology is slightly not good currency anymore, we know this. So if they're native speakers of digital technology, view it in a very different way. They see technology as the means of getting things done, of communicating, sharing, presenting. In linguistic terms, our students see technology as verbs. Back to the verbs. Now, not all verbs are good. Plagiarizing is a bad verb. Illegal downloading, potentially another bad word. Looking at pictures of people with no clothes on. It's a kind of a long verb, but could be a bad verb. So not all verbs are good. Verbing is good, but not all verbs are good. So Prensky's big problem, and if you've heard of him, you may know, Prensky's big problem was that he said that this was entirely age-related. So all young people are brilliant with technology, and all old people are crap at technology. That was pretty much, that summarizes his book, really. So don't buy it. There's no point. It's a good book, but I've just given you a perfect summary of it. And clearly that's problematic. And I give an example always of my dad. My dad's 84 this year. He got his first computer when he retired at the age of 65. He went to night school, and he learned how to use Word and PowerPoint and Excel and all sorts of other things. He eventually got connected to the internet. About 8 years ago, he moved from a desktop computer to a laptop computer, much to the annoyance of my mum at that time, because he then sat in the living room playing solitaire on a computer every night. And he's now on a tablet computer. And he's very good at the tablet computer. No one's ever taught him how to use it. He's on Facebook, unfortunately, so I now have absolutely nothing to talk to him about. I phone him up, I say, we went for a walk on Sunday. He said, I know, I saw it on Facebook. So now I just phone him up and I say, have you seen Facebook today? Bye. So, it's not an age, technology's never an age thing, it's always an attitude thing, always. Some people have a good attitude towards technology and some people don't. And it doesn't matter how old you are. I know plenty of young people who have terrible attitudes to technology. Well, actually, I know plenty of young people who have terrible attitudes, but that's a separate question. Okay, so what is it? What exactly does it mean to be digitally literate? Now, 2 or 3 years ago, I wrote a book with 2 colleagues of mine, Nikki Hockley and Marc Prensky. It's available for download from a number of illegal download sites online. So if you want a copy afterwards, it's called Digital Literacies. There are lots of good quality websites you'll find it on for nothing. So please do go and download it. And, just send me a postcard or something. So when we were working out what it meant to be digitally literate, we kind of exploded this concept and we put things into 4 different areas. So I'd just like to talk you through that. Don't worry, if you fall asleep in this bit, there's an interesting bit coming afterwards. So hang on for 10 minutes and everything will be all right. So the first set of literacies that we described, we said were literacies that focus on language. So in there you'll see traditional literacies like print literacy, the ability to read and understand books, magazines, etc., etc. And actually, without the core literacies, without the reading and writing and arithmetic, the rest of the literacies don't work at all. So we're still based on a fundamental set of literacies, on those core ones, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So print literacy, and print's one that we've had for a long, long time now. But print literacy has been slightly confused by online reading. So because online reading is a totally different experience to reading on paper, right? If you're reading on paper, you've got the paper, and of course you can turn over pages, but you can't watch the video or click on a word in a print book and open up another book. It would be magic if you could, but you can't. But on-screen reading is absolutely full of things designed to distract people from the process of reading. So when you take students along to a website for them to quickly scan it for something, it's fine. Some of them are going to quickly scan it, but some of them are going to get to line 3, see a link, click on it, and go off somewhere else. And when they get to that somewhere else, they're going to see another link on there, or maybe a video, and they'll watch the video, or an advertisement, and they'll click on the advertisement. And you're merrily up the front thinking, this class is going brilliantly, But half of your students are miles away, 5 or 6 websites away doing something else. It's what we call hypertext literacy. It's actually the ability to stay focused. And some of you may know what that's like yourselves. I certainly know a typical morning for me is get up, walk the dog, come home, have breakfast, sit down with every intention of getting some work done. I work from home. Open up my email, reply to the personal ones, ignore the work ones for a little while, have a look at Facebook, have a look at the news, the BBC website, the Guardian website, have another look at Facebook, or follow a couple of links from Facebook, watch some videos, watch some of the, if you liked this video, you may also like these videos. And then all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock and it's time for coffee. And then have coffee, and then you get back and you think, I'll get stuck into some work in a minute. And so it goes on for me on most days. So I know what it is to be distracted. It's very easy. There are lots of shiny, flashy things online. And you don't get that in a book or a magazine and stuff. Of course, you get pictures in a magazine, but it's not the same. You're still in the magazine. So reading has become a totally different thing for lots of people. And we could go on really. Texting, we all know about texting or mobiles. They've opened up a whole new set of Englishes for people, new genres of English. Now, email's an interesting one. How many of you still teach formal and informal letter writing in your classes? No? No? Someone's... Yeah, okay. A few people. When was the last time you sat down and wrote formal and informal letters? I actually can't remember the last time I wrote a letter, to be honest. But we do still teach those skills. So, how much email do we teach? How much instant messaging English do we teach? When lots of people move into large international corporate environments these days, they end up with internal chat messaging systems with other branches in other countries. So what does the English in those environments look like? Can you lol your boss? So I don't know the answer to that. I suspect the answer is no, or probably not. What does a job application email look like? Does a job application email start with, "Dear Sir" or "Madam"? When was the last time you started an email with "Dear Sir" or "Madam"? Mine always start with the name of, I just put Dave, comma. I don't always put Dave because they're not always called Dave. And that would be rude. But usually I just put the name of the person and a comma. And then I write. And then at the end, do you put yours sincerely? Yours faithfully? Do we do these? What do you put at the end of an email? I put best. Just best, comma. Because I think best is brilliant, because it could be anything, couldn't it? Best shuffle off and die. It could be. It could be anything. But those genres are interesting. How do we teach them? How do we teach people to cope with those genres? They may not need to use them, not all of them, but they will need to recognize them and understand them and know the register of those genres. We've got a couple of others in there which are perhaps not so important for this. Gaming is obviously on the rise in all sorts of aspects. There are plenty of game-based English language websites online. And a lot of them are very popular. Some of you may know the website Lyrics Training. Has anyone seen that one? So Lyrics Training allows a student to pick a video from YouTube and have it automatically gap-filled for them underneath. And the video plays and they type the missing words. If they don't type a missing word, the video stops playing, rather annoyingly. But I had students last summer. I was doing some substitution teaching in the summer, and they would do classes with me, and then they'd go home and do 3 hours of lyrics training on computers. This is the kind of practice that we dream of as teachers, of getting people to do that amount of work. So gaming clearly has a future and a lot of potential, and that's one to watch. I'm going to move on to the second one. They came up a little bit when you were talking, and those are literacies and skills that focus on information. There are 3 key ones really. The first one was mentioned, I think, search. And search is probably, if I was going to teach people to do anything, it would be up in this circle. So search is probably the single most important part of being digitally literate. Can you find things, and how quickly can you find them? And that's a huge thing, really. And I remember years ago when I was training teachers to use things like Google, and people would search and they'd go, Gavin, there's nothing on the internet. And I'd go and look at their screen, and they'd gone to Google and they typed in the word Australia, and it said 37 million results. And I thought, well, that's not nothing, is it? It's actually quite a lot. What they mean is, Gavin, there's too much on the internet, which is very true, actually. And most of it's rubbish, so don't go there. It's a bad place. Being able to very, very quickly get to what you need is a massively useful skill these days, and it will become more and more important. But it's not just about finding stuff. It's about knowing whether that stuff is good or bad. That was also mentioned here. Yeah? So information literacy, what's good and what's bad. Is that website real or not real? Is the information on that website true or not true? Is it useful or useless to me or my students or whatever? Being able to cast a critical eye over what we find online is increasingly important. And it's increasingly important because there's a lot of stuff online that really is not true. And you'll see this now. I'm sure most of you are on social networks, which I'll come to in a second. You see people posting outraged photographs of something or other, and everyone posts them and reposts them and reposts them. They go round and around for a day. And then someone goes, actually, do you know what? That's not real. And everyone goes, oh, right, okay. There's a very famous one in the UK. It shows the Parliament building full, and it says MPs discussing their pay rise, and it's full and they're all laughing. And then there's one with like 5 MPs like that, and it's something like, MPs discussing disability allowance. And people post this, how outrageous the Conservatives are, and blah, blah, blah. It never happened. It's just someone took 2 photographs and put a little thing underneath to outrage everyone. Being able to spot that is hugely important, I think. And the last bit of this equation is what we call tagging literacy, and that's the ability to find things, evaluate things, and then store them so that you can come back to them later. Now, this is a bit that I'm singularly bad at. I have about 6,000 bookmarks in Firefox, and I have no idea what any of them do. So until about a year and a half ago, a typical workflow for me was Facebook, someone recommends a website, I click the link, I open it, I go, oh, that looks interesting, I'll save that for later. And I would bookmark it and I would never ever look at it ever again. So I have thousands of these things, no idea. Massively important, tag things, put keywords in, so that you can come back to them. I now use Evernote, I'm sure some of you do, I use Evernote to keep everything clearly stuck in boxes with tags so I can come back to it. These are kind of real key skills, these 3, I think, massively important. The next set is what we call focus on connections, and those are part of the literacy puzzle connected with us as people, how we portray ourselves, and how others see us. So personal literacy talks about what you look like online. So if I was to take your name and stick it into Google, what would I find? Would I find a serious professional? Someone who likes too much partying on Saturday nights? Is there a photo of you in a bath covered in baked beans? This is what people call your digital footprint. And your digital footprint is kind of here to stay. It's virtually impossible to get something off the web. You can get it hidden a little bit, but to actually get it off is very, very complex. Now, a lot of us probably know a little bit about this. Lots of younger people often have problems with privacy settings, things like that. When you, and this can count against people slowly. I think it was a guy from Google who said that he thought that by the year 2025, half of under 25s would have to change their name legally to escape their digital pasts, which is quite frightening. But we put stuff up, don't we? We put stuff on Facebook and Twitter, we put videos on YouTube, and we put pictures on Flickr, and we're members of discussion groups maybe, or online communities, and all of those things are part of our digital footprint. When you apply to go to university in the UK now, one of the first things the admissions office does is look to see if you're on Facebook and look to see what kind of person you are to decide whether they want you coming to their college or not. And we've had numerous examples in the UK of people losing their jobs because of Facebook. So someone saying, I think I'm going to have a sickie, stay at home, pretend to be ill, going to have a sickie today and go and watch the football. And forgetting, of course, that their boss is one of their friends on Facebook. And this happens increasingly. So, curating, as the man said, curating your online presence is hugely important, I think. The other ones, what we call network and participatory and intercultural, are all linked to an extent. And they really refer to how we interact online, how we interact with people. When we're in groups, like maybe teacher discussion groups, what kind of person we're perceived as, how much we contribute and how much we take. Do we give or do we just take? Are we the grumpy one, the helpful one, the argumentative one? Which kind of person are we online? Massively important. And the fourth category is what we called a focus on redesign. There's only really one literacy in there. It's what we called remix. And this is more of a kind of younger person's thing. And this is taking something and changing it. Taking a video and manipulating it, taking photographs and manipulating them, or manipulating cartoons, often for comic effect, but sometimes for political effect. It's a hard one to explain, so I've got an example for you. And it's one of the oldest examples that I found. It comes from the time of the First Gulf War. You'll no doubt know that my country and the United States have what we euphemistically call a special relationship. It's special from one of the partners. And at the time of that First Gulf War, Tony Blair and George Bush were having special times. And this is one of the remixes that came out of that time, if it works. It hasn't worked so far, has it? Let's see. It's not the whole song, it finishes in a second, but I'm waiting for my favourite line, which is coming up now. 3, 2, 1. It's the best line. So it's easy to look at that and write it off as a stupid piece of work. It's actually very clever on all sorts of levels. It's technically clever. There's a lot of lip syncing going on there with the song, some carefully chosen video materials, obviously, for a political message. And one of the oldest ones I've found, we have an artist in the UK at the moment called Cassette Boy, who's really worth looking out for on YouTube. And Cassette Boy does loads of political remixes, which are really, really good and very funny. So that's kind of an exploded look at what we thought digital literacy meant. Of course, there are other interpretations. That's just one of them. Now, I'm going to have a little break now because it's time for the Are You Digitally Literate quiz, in which you all participate. And some of you will have to leave after the first round, okay? So it's worth making a big effort here, because I'll be coming and just pulling people out, and you'll have to go home, and it'll be embarrassing. So do try and join in to the fullest extent possible, okay? So, there are 3 screens. On the first screen, I have some statements about technology. I'm going to ask you to get together in groups of 2, 3, or 4, depending on how comfortable you feel. And if you can answer yes to any of these statements, I'd like you to give your colleagues a little bit more information about that particular one, okay? That's it. You've got 2 or 3 minutes. I shall leave you to form your own groups. Now, I know when you ask teachers to form groups, they take 20 minutes. So try and do it as quickly as possible, like your students do. Okay, I'm just gonna stop you there, if I may. Someone's clapping. I haven't finished yet, but thank you very much. Hello. I will have to shout at you. Shut it. Sorry. I'm espousing a new methodological approach in English. It's called the violent way. So please don't tempt me. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 8 statements. Can anyone answer yes to all of those 8 statements? Just put your hand up if you can. 2 sad people in the room. 3, excellent. Come and join us. Any more? Sean, sorry mate, it's just you and me. How sad we are. Now, the second one, I check Facebook first thing in the morning. It used to say I check email first thing in the morning, but obviously that's evolved. In England, it turns out that about 53% of people check Facebook first thing in the morning before they roll over and say good morning to the person they've been sleeping next to, which is interesting. Okay, now, yeah?
It's on Facebook, it's very already.
There you go. Okay, the second screen has some logos of websites, okay? Some of them may not exist anymore, just to make it more complicated. What I'd like you to do in your group is pick a logo and tell your colleagues what that website does or did. They will then pick one and tell you. Okay, you ready? Go. Okay, that should pretty much be long enough, I'd say. We have Twitter at the top, short SMS service. Facebook, obviously, TeacherTube, which used to be the place to go for education-related videos, but now, of course, YouTube has a much better organised education set. Napster, which used to be the #1 illegal music downloading service. Everyone's nodding at, the good old days. Wet Paint and Ning, 2 websites that allow you to create kind of group collaborative spaces online. LinkedIn, which is like Facebook, but for adults. Blogger for blogging, obviously. eBay for selling your Christmas presents. YouTube for sharing videos online. Flickr for sharing photos online. And the one on the right is Wikipedia. Someone said to me once, they said, it looks like the Death Star. And I thought, they could rebrand Wikipedia, the Death Star of education. In a world. Anyway, yes. Okay, now, the last part, we're back to the statements, okay? More statements. If you can answer yes to the statements, then please give your colleagues a little bit more information about that particular one. Okay, off you go. You've got 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, I'll stop you there. Anybody edited a Wikipedia entry? Not bad. That's about a dozen people. Excellent. It's a great act. I used to do, when I was teaching in Barcelona, I used to regularly have my higher level students go in and check up the entry on Barcelona and Wikipedia and make any corrections they thought necessary. Sometimes not good ones, but hey, that's Wikipedia for you. If you've got a well-developed sense of humour, there's a fabulous website which is Uncyclopedia. So uncyclopedia.org is like the dark side of Wikipedia. Everything on it is complete lies and rubbish. It's a cracking good website, but not for the easily offended. But I used to get my students to go into there and correct the whole entry, because basically the whole entry is designed to be false. Uncyclopedia.org, very good website. Anybody meet their partner online? Not in a catalogue, just through shared interests. Okay, there are quite a few of us, yeah. It's 44% of relationships in the UK now start online. Wow. And someone said to me, do they, yeah, but how long do they last? Now, it turns out actually that lots of them last a lot longer because people tend to meet online in what are called affinity spaces, places where they share a common interest. So people meet in like a music lovers place or a cinema loving place, whereas people who meet in real life outside tend to meet in a very selected little gene pool of the people they work with. And that's about it. So in fact, meeting someone online, you've got more chance of meeting someone who's going to have closer interest to you than actually out there in the scary world, which we mustn't ever go to. Never go to it. So, now, if you can answer yes to a lot of these, if you recognise the logos, does it make you digitally literate? I think the answer is probably not. But it does mean that you've got a vague idea of what's happening somewhere out there in the scary world. And I actually think that's a good starting point. To be comfortable with these things is actually a good place to be. And then moving on to actually investigating some of these things is probably the next step. So we've had what is digital literacy and are you digitally literate? So the third question is, why is it important? Now the question could have been, is it important? To which the answer is obviously yes. So I've just made it, why is it important? Because it saves time. So why is it important? Now the answer to that is, shift happens. Not my joke, unfortunately. Someone far cleverer than me thought of that. But shift happens. You have to be very careful when you say that. But shift does happen. And many shifts have happened in the last few years. This is one of the biggest shifts that's happened, I think. That lots of countries have moved from production through service industry to what are now called knowledge economies. Moving bits of information around, moving data around. It's a massive business these days. Maybe not here, maybe not in the UK, but in certain countries, massive. Massive in Eastern European countries, Romania, Poland, famous for their good quality programmers. India too. Most of corporate America's accounts are actually done overnight in India and sent back in the morning. If I call my bank in England for help, I'm talking to someone in India, usually in Bangalore, where all the call centres are. And they get a daily bulletin in the call centres of what the weather's like in the UK and what happened in EastEnders the night before. So when people phone up, they really can pretend that they live in Burnley. It's a really interesting thing. It's cheaper there. It's cheaper to get it done there. And in fact, now the call centres have moved out of India to the Philippines and Vietnam and Indonesia, and so it goes on. And at least one high street bank in the UK is now advertising proudly, all our call centres are in the UK. So it's kind of going round and round and round. But increasingly, people are looking for more efficient and cheaper ways of getting things done. And a lot of those things involve data in one form or another. Medical records, accounts, you name it. It has to be done. And actually, Spain's quite a good example of that. I was in Spain for 23 years. Before I arrived in Spain, so up until the mid to late 50s, Spain was largely agrarian, lots of growing stuff. And then the package holiday was invented, and suddenly Spain became a massive tourist industry. And the economy moved on from textiles and fruit and vegetables, not entirely obviously, but a significant portion of it, to servicing the tourist industry. And then in the early 2000s, people discovered that there were other places you could go on holiday apart from Spain, like Greece and Croatia and all sorts of other places which were cheaper and had the same climate. And so they moved out of Spain, and Spain had to think of something else to do. And so there's quite a lot of knowledge economy stuff going on in Spain. And this goes on and on and on. But clearly, and what the big point behind this is obviously that the people that we teach are going into a different world to the one we know and work in. And that a lot of the jobs they're going to get eventually, if they're lucky enough to get a job, are going to involve a lot of these literacies, a lot of these basic skills. So we need to cover them in some way or another, at least start to cover them in some way or another, because they're going to be hugely important. As someone famously said, we're preparing people for jobs that don't even exist yet. So the more skills we can give people in this arena, potentially the better off they are. So that's one shift. There's another shift. There's a shift in technology. Now, not many people know that actually Google did exist as an information-based company before the internet, before it became electronic. And they were largely an international library indexing service. So you could fill in a query and send it off to Google. They would patch into your local libraries in the area, and they would send you back suggestions of where you might find that information or that publication or whatever. So essentially they were doing the same job beforehand. But you'll notice this is a reproduction of their classic kind of post off for information. It says, please allow 30 days for search results. Now, if you compare that to Google today, where you go along, you put something in, it says 18 million results, 0.06 seconds. That is a huge shift. Access to information, a massive, massive shift. And that's changed the way we view learning, I think, and the way we approach learning. Before I move on, this never happened, okay? That's not real. Don't go home and tell your partners, I learned something brilliant from this bloke Gavin today. Google was once a postal service, because they'll Google it, and they'll find out that it wasn't, and then they'll think you're stupid, but more importantly, they'll think I'm stupid, and I don't want that to happen. So this isn't real, okay? But the speed in which we access information is real, and that's a massive challenge. Other shifts in mobility. So on the left, you've got a mobile computer from the 1980s, 1990s. Look how smart and wonderfully, incredibly space-age that looks. Does anyone remember the Sony Vaio? It was like a fold-up keyboard. Had a really stupid, pointless screen and well, you can see it's stupid because you have to you go around, you get kidney failure, wouldn't you, with it smashing you in the kidneys all the time. What we have now, of course, and I was going to show you mine, but it's currently sitting in the bathroom in my house in the United Kingdom, and my phone. Yeah, first time I've been without a phone for years, I think, and I spent the first hour hyperventilating and thinking I was going to die. And here I am. And actually, it's great. I woke up this morning, I didn't look at my mobile phone. I just lay in bed thinking, wish I brought my mobile phone with me. So that was pleasant. But I've come to accept it now, and I'll get it back tomorrow. It's still there. It's probably got some important things on it. Someone's probably died or something, I don't know, but there you go. What can you do? But we have these things and we carry them around. You're all connected to 3G or 4G or probably 5G here on the continent. It's all much better on the continent. 5G or 6G or something. You've probably got the whole internet in your phones in Europe, mainland Europe. Back in the UK, we still have to cycle to generate enough electricity to... So we have all this information, we have access to all this information all the time on the go. It's brilliant. We can look things up on maps and we can check Wikipedia and we can find out who directed that film, and no one ever has an argument in the pub anymore because you can settle it in 1 second by just looking up the answer rather than discussing it meaningfully for hours and hours on end. What's startling about that is what we in education do with them, which is to get people to turn them off and put them back in their bags. And I'm still utterly amazed at that approach. Turn them off, put them back in the bag, because wouldn't it be awful, terrible, indescribably awful if our students had access to all that information? Imagine, what would be the point of me if they could access information that I know? It's a weird approach. So turn them off, put them back in the bags, Let's not let all that knowledge and access to information get in the way of learning in my class where I'm in charge. Thank you very much. Put that away. That's enough of that. Mobile's massive. I'm going to be talking about that in the workshop later, but mobile's brilliant. Mobile allows people to bring the outside world into class and to take what they do in class out into the real world. And it provides one of the very few brilliant links between what happens outside and what happens inside the class, allowing people to carry their learning around with them. I think it's utterly brilliant. Don't turn them off, turn them back on. Let's have a revolution. And lastly, of course, the shift to them. We call them students, learners, clients, all sorts of things. They're changing. Now, that doesn't mean we have to pander to everyone's desire. We don't have to all sit down and play Minecraft for 20 hours a week in class or whatever. What it means is, I think, is just looking at the kind of interactions that people have with technology outside the classroom and trying to work out whether we can bring those interactions into the classroom in a meaningful, pedagogically principled way. So not playing games and watching videos and listening to songs all day, every day, but looking for meaningful interactions with technology, where people actually get something out of it, learn something or create something. That's kind of the important thing. How are we doing for time? Brilliant, I'm going to finish early. So, now the big fear for teachers is that lots of teachers are very uncomfortable with technology, right? In my experience. That's not the teacher's fault. Teachers don't get any training, so why would they be comfortable with technology? But one of the things I hear all the time from teachers is, oh, my students, they're so tech savvy. I couldn't do anything with technology because I'd be really embarrassed because they're so tech savvy. This is a quote from a guy called Mike Sansone, which I really like. He says, actually, they're not tech savvy at all. What they are is tech comfortable with technology. They're tech comfy. They can download pictures of people with no clothes on. They can find Windows 10 online for free and all that kind of stuff. That's being comfortable with technology. They know how to make a video. They know how to send emails, create a Facebook account. What they don't know, and if you look at savvy's, the clue's in the word really, savvy, knowledge, is they don't have the knowledge to transform their use of technology into something useful. They don't know how to use the technology in the service of their learning, and that's where we come in. It's not to make people tech savvy, it's not to tech comfy, it's not to teach people how to use tools because they know how to use them. It's trying to show them how those tools can be used in the service of their learning. And that's kind of the important bit. We don't need to know how to use technology. We need to know how technology can be used in learning. And that's a totally different thing. It's not a tools thing at all. Okay, so last question. I'm going to do this very quickly in about 3 minutes so you can all go and have a cup of coffee and that. Is what does it mean for teachers? Well, what it means basically is that we're all in a little bit of trouble for various reasons. But the big bit of trouble we're in is that we never, ever, ever, or very rarely get training in the uses of technology, and that's what we're missing. So this is a famous model called the TPAC model, and it talks about teacher training. So at the bottom you have these two spheres, what's called the pedagogical content and the content knowledge. And this is basically what happens. When you're learning to be a teacher, you acquire a level of comfort in those two domains. So you learn what to teach, the content knowledge, could be English, maths, physics, whatever, but you learn that content, you learn it thoroughly, and you learn it well. And that's combined with learning the pedagogical knowledge, so learning how to teach the content. And that's the model. That's the kind of reading, writing, and arithmetic model of teacher training, if you like, the early literacy, numeracy thing. What's missing is the third sphere, which sits at the top, hence TPAC. And that is the technological knowledge. So seeing how technology can help us teach the content. So we're basically aiming for that tiny little bit in the middle. Now the problem with it is that in most teacher training, the trainers training new teachers do not use technology in their training sessions. So trainee teachers don't see good use of technology when they're learning to be teachers, and they therefore can't take that good use of technology into the classroom with them when they start teaching. So until teacher training includes this sphere, the technological sphere, along with the other two, we're not going to get over the teacher fear of technology. So the key to all this really is training, good training for us, so that we can pass on those good habits to the rest of them.